And hello, welcome to the Social Justice Forum. I am your host, Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. Now, if you're asking the question, what is the show all about? Well, we bring you a forum discussing and providing a deeper understanding of the issues and inequities that so many people face. Things such as systemic inequalities to pressing social problems. Our guests provide multiple perspectives as well as insights to help us better understand and address these challenges. So we invite you to stay connected to us. The Social Justice Forum starts now. And welcome back. Our next guest, a true force for change, dedicated to fostering critical conversations on race, justice, and equity. Now, with a rich background in academia as well as the arts, she's committed to empowering underrepresented communities as well as amplifying their voices. She is the vice president at CenterState CEO, and also she holds a degree in integrative arts from Penn State University, a master's degree in higher education and student affairs, and then also a PhD in higher education with a focus on race and equity from Indiana University. So I says, well, why is that important? Well, I need you to know she and 7 of her colleagues made history at Indiana University, the largest group to get the PhD, and graduated with PhD simultaneously in the School of Education. They were deemed the Great 8, and they were featured in the 2016 Ebony Magazine's Power 100 list. And so we are pleased to have Dr. Juhanna Rogers with us, and glad to have you sharing.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Yes, glad to have you back. You know, listen, we're having this conversation, and conversation is what's needed. Talking about what's going on today, you know, we're up in the Northeast, but in the Southeast, we know what's happening. DEI, huge issue. Florida, immediate termination of people as soon as DEI law is passed to retract. In many ways, it seems like we're going 40 years back.
Yeah. And it's scary.
Right.
It's scary. I was just out in Las Vegas for a conference, and, you know, it hit me because there are colleges and universities, when they repealed the affirmative action legislation that is cutting programs, and programs that I know my parents have benefited from, many folks have benefited from, and it's like, okay, well, what will happen if we know, you know, policies and practices haven't changed, right? DEI, if it's done well, and I'll say that again, if it's done well,
right,
it should be empowering people to think about the broad human experiences, right? What growing up in poverty means. And it doesn't just mean that you might have limited resources. Those limited resources create a lived experience that might not get you exposed to opportunities that help you complete the SATs or ACT. Or regions, in the same way as students that grew up in an upper class household, right? And so how do we take those things into consideration, right? That's what, you know, affirmative action, you know, DEI, critical thinking around equity helps us to do, right? And when we take that away, you know, what begins to happen? And right now, as we see almost 8 states banning and outlawing the slashing of jobs for folks that have been doing the work that has gotten a lot of people into a lot of places that they wouldn't have been in. So what does that leave us to look forward to?
We've got critics who say that when it comes to DEI, and when we talk about DEI, for those who may not be so familiar, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's pretty much what DEI means, and we can break down a little bit more in just a second. But when we talk about critics of DEI, they say, listen, it's basically dealing with race and racism, and we don't need to do that. We're okay, we're good. We're in a post-racial America.
Are we, though?
Did you see my face?
Right.
We're in a post-racial America, right? Like, so we know that's not real.
No, that's
but
not real.
How do you counter those critics who say, listen, you know what, when it comes to DEI, it's really about race, but I argue that it's more about cultural competency.
It's more about cultural, well, it starts with cultural competency, right? And the thing that when I'm working with leaders, when we are developing experiences, I often say, right, let's start with race, because that's one of the taboo things that we don't really talk about, right? We could be sitting next to each other, we could be in a cubicle, we've worked together 20 years, but we really never talk about what happens when I leave work. If I'm driving through the neighborhood to get to where my office is, do I feel safe? Have I been stopped? When I get hired, even for many professionals that are climbing the corporate ladder, right, and you're earning the monies, do I feel comfortable moving into so-called the good neighborhoods, right? Like when we talk about inclusivity and diversity of an organization, we're talking about, yes, there's different people that should be embraced and feel comfortable working there, but depending on gender, depending on people's faith, depending on the socioeconomic background that they're coming from, it may impact their lens. They may see things differently. And so I think that scares some folks because they feel uncomfortable. Right? Like, ooh, we didn't ever talk about this. I don't know how to talk about it. I don't know if, I'm going to make others uncomfortable. I'm going to ask a stupid question. And sometimes I'm like, you need to ask the stupid questions. And we need to check you about it and educate you on why it's not an appropriate question or how is it, offensive. And then let's move on to the next point, right? How do we build more diverse products for all audiences? How do we think about pharmaceutical sales in different communities and access to medicines, right? Like that's when, if we really sit down and engage in equitable conversations, those could be some of the outcomes, right? Instead of putting out products and then going, the price mark or where it's located or stores in certain zip codes aren't getting access to products in the same way. Why? Right?
When I think about putting it out there like that, right, it seems like a no-brainer, but we know that it's not a no-brainer. We know that there's a lot of resistance. And I think that sometimes people are very comfortable remaining ignorant.
Yeah, because it all requires you to get out of your comfort.
Right.
And for some folks, when we talk about privilege or things of that nature or with leadership, I often challenge folks to think about if you were a college student in the 80s or 90s and you were in the business school or wherever you were on campus and you've gone into corporate America and been working in corporate since then, you probably weren't required to take a class that talked about culture if you didn't choose to. Right? And so there are folks that have worked 30 and 40 years that didn't have to think about pronoun usage or women's pay and how they set up salaries. They weren't challenged. We didn't ask questions. And if you weren't trained to do that, then you're probably just doing the same thing that you learned how to do when you came into your profession.
Right.
And so now when we talk about DEI, you got to think a little bit on your job. And so if you have your formula and your routine set up, or like, okay, I'm going to do this from 8 to 4:30, and then I can walk out the door, thinking more equitably about things might mean, oh, well, this step right in this job description is going to take a little bit more thought. It's not going to be like I can just pull the one we've been using for the past 10 years or 3 years off the website. Like, let's think about if we really need a college degree or if lived experience could happen. Let's talk about, okay, salary bands and where this person falls and what we're asking them to do. And is it reflective of my position, right? And that's the deeper thinking folks have to do when they were like, oh yeah, I don't, Right. Like, I don't want to hold anybody back, but don't ask me to change what I've been doing because that's going to take 15 minutes off my commute.
Right, exactly. And I cannot be bothered.
I don't want to do that. I figured it out already.
Right.
Right? And when I say that in front of folks, they start laughing because it's so true.
It's so true, it's so real. And I think that we have to really, if we want real results, we have to put real work in.
And that's universal, right? Now, there's more folks that probably don't look like us that are in the majority of those leadership positions, but everybody, right, even folks that do look like us are in those same position where I'm like, okay, y'all want me to go outside of what I've been doing? I've established my routine, right? And that's where when we really start to talk about this isn't about, there is a black and white element, there is a race element, but there's also an LGBTQIA issue, right? There's also a women's issue. And Black men may not be comfortable talking about why healthcare is important to their female counterparts in ways that they may not have to consider, and what that means, or mothering and what that puts on their female employees, and how do we support that in a different way, right? So,
And I want to switch gears just for a second, because I'm almost out of time with you, but I want to take the time to share a little bit about your work with women.
Yeah.
Because you have two things. Number one, you have a show, Behind the Woman. And then also, I want to talk about this fact that you are touring on a one-woman show on college campuses.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the one-woman show.
Yeah, well, when I finished my PhD, you mentioned that I felt a weight because I was passionate about doing this equity work, but I'm also an artist. And so during COVID, when we had the world stopped and we were inside, we had so much time. And so I started working on another degree that was focused in the arts, right? And I feel like, okay, well, I got a job. Now I can do some more artistic stuff because, my mama was like, listen, that's cute. right, but we need to make sure you have a paycheck, right? And so I did that. And so I started my MFA because I always have loved playwriting. There's a television show where I get to sit down and tell women's stories, and I want to try to find ways to do it on different stages. And so with my experience as a graduate student at IU, there were so many moments where the pursuit of education and talking about my community was a challenge, right? Similar to what we're seeing now in different ways. And so I wanted to talk about what it took for me being a young Black female coming out of, the metro area, growing up in Jersey, doing a lot of artistic stuff between the city and there, and making it in academia. And so I wrote a story about what it's like to grow up in zip codes where everybody's like, well, we're not going to expect much. Black or brown girls from this neighborhood, they're not necessarily the most respectable individuals, right? All those negative stereotypes about urban communities, and what it took to sit in the classroom and challenge those ideas, to advocate for myself, and how it creates a sense of questioning. Some people call it imposter syndrome at times, where you feel like, okay, do I really belong? Am I going to say something? How do I represent my community, right? And so my show Shattering deals with all of that, or talks about all of that. And I use poetry and spoken word to express the frustration and angst that I felt. And one of the things I thought to do was, well, go back to the campuses where, there are going to be the girls that come from your neighborhood, right, that are trying to get to maybe where I am, sort of, kind of speak.
Dealing with the imposter syndrome, right?
Right, dealing with the imposter syndrome. And so I wrote this play called Shattering that was about my story and the moments that helped me get through all those things, the people that came along to inspire me and present opportunities. And I'm kind of gifting it back on campuses and having conversations with students, but also faculty and staff. Because whether you're still a student or you're on the other side, right, if you're coming from where many times the community in which I come from, right, the Bronx, the city, folks are like, oh, how you get here?
Right.
What you doing here, right? And so Shattering is about getting past those moments, shattering the glass ceiling, but still dealing with the idea of race and gender.
Yeah, I got to leave you for another conversation on another day. We have to talk about higher education.
Yes.
Because I think we don't see too many examples. We got many of them. We don't see too many of them. And why is that? But then also, before we go, just real quickly, where can people find Behind the Woman?
Yes, Behind the Woman is on PBS, WCNY specifically. It's going to be starting again in May, but if they would like to watch the show and learn about women leaders, they can go to WCNY.org/Behind the Woman. All
right, Dr. Juhanna Rogers, good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, taking a quick break. We will be back with more right after this. And we are back. Our next guest champions the idea of elevating individuals to realize their full potential and freeing them through entrepreneurship. Now, with nearly 2 decades of experience in global business development, she channels this expertise into driving impactful change through visionary execution. Here now is the executive producer of Green Project and founder of Prenerology Global. We've got Lakeisha French. And Lakeisha, good to have you.
Great. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I want to take a moment just to get your thought on this. How do you get to the place where you actually have this mixture, if you will, this fusion of like economic empowerment and entrepreneurship? What's behind the thought here?
Sure. So, the thought behind that comes from lived experience. I myself grew up in the inner city. I was born and raised in Jersey City, New Jersey, and spent a lot of time watching my surroundings, but also spent a lot of time getting involved in economic development programs very early on. I understood the challenges and barriers that were there growing up where I was from. And so I started searching for solutions and found entrepreneurship, or it found me. And I saw entrepreneurship as a pathway to liberation, but I also saw it as a way to create economic prosperity, not just individual economic prosperity, but as a collective. Started focusing a lot on the Black community, um, many marginalized communities, and it starts with curiosity. So I was just curious, is this something, could entrepreneurship lead us on a pathway to parity in terms of economically and also social parity, being a citizen in the United States, but then looking at blackness around the world, wondering if we could ever get to a place where we don't have these silent social contracts that we have to abide by. And so entrepreneurship, again, showed up as a pathway to that liberation, both economically and socially, being able to build and create and innovate the world that you envision, creating what you don't see, and also benefiting from it economically.
Yeah, you've been a great advocate when it comes to entrepreneurship and particularly equity. We've been talking on the show about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but when we talk about equity in entrepreneurship, that is huge. How do you define equity in entrepreneurship?
Ooh, I would define equity in entrepreneurship as everyone having the freedom to fail.
And when you say that, unpack that for a moment, because you say everyone has, and I know where you're going, but take us there.
Yeah. So if you look at the startup world, for example, right, there's been a lot of buzz the past decade or so around tech companies in particular, the emerging technology that's happening with AI. We're moving into quantum now. And so when you think about startup entrepreneurship, technology, and the things that we build, right, I talked about, a few minutes ago about creating the things that you wish existed or that need to exist, whether that's a product, a service, a nonprofit. That takes capital. It takes capital, both social and economic capital, to build those things. A lot of the time, it takes failure, right? You have to fail forward. If you talk to most successful startup entrepreneurs or innovators, they will tell you that they failed 99 times, and that one time they were successful, right? And they have built $100 million company, $1 billion company, or even successful small businesses. It takes many attempts at it, and so unfortunately, you need capital to be able to do that. Again, social and economic, and that is something that marginalized communities, in particular, the global Black community and diaspora, has not been afforded. We have, for a very long time, been the asset class and the commodity that has been used to be the invisible engine of the U.S. and global economy, but have never received a return on that investment. So the capital is not there because of systemic issues, but the capitalism itself was built on the backs of the Black community, and so that capital is not there. The policies are not in place to create the economic injection that's needed. So when you talk about entrepreneurship and starting businesses, yes, there is the build it from the bottom up and the bootstrapping, but a lot of the times it takes failure and it takes money and relationships, and that is a barrier to opportunity.
Yeah.
So the freedom to fail is the freedom to attempt to create.
We talk about your work. Some of the work that you've done has actually been able to transform the landscape when it comes to startups, when it comes to organizations. Share a little bit with us about the work that you've done and how you've been able to make that transformational impact.
Sure, sure. Oh gosh, it has been a joy. I will say that. I know a lot of the times when we talk about DEI and entrepreneurship in particular within Black and Brown communities, we talk a lot about the disparities and the challenges. But I have really, truly found it enjoyable to work with Black innovators and entrepreneurs and creatives to help them get the tools that they need to be able to build successful businesses. I do believe in scientific entrepreneurship. I've spent a lot of time in the tech ecosystem and tech economies, helping to build ecosystems for over the past 18 years. And so all those learnings that I picked up on, and quite frankly, sometimes distracting for what I was seeing our white counterparts doing, building over and over again. There are methods to this. There are tools. There are processes and systems that work. When you go into a startup or a small business, you get to see that. So I've spent my career both from a programmatic perspective. I developed a youth entrepreneurship program for K through 12 students called CEO of My Life. That still operates globally to this day, and then moved into adult entrepreneurship training. So it to me, given us the tools to be able to create, we don't lack passion and ingenuity and vision, but those tools is what's important. So that's what I've spent my career doing.
Yeah. You're also the executive producer, or I should say executive producer of the Green Project. And I want to have an opportunity for you to share a little bit about the Green Project and how that works.
Yeah, sure. So this is again all a part of that body of work. And so as I was, doing, programmatic work, training entrepreneurs and innovators, and then moved into ecosystem building, helping them build models around technology economies, I realized that we would never be able to have a sustainable pathway for Black entrepreneurs to be a part of the future economies if we continue to have like these emotionally driven responses, like during George Floyd's murder, when you had all these companies giving money to Black entrepreneurs. And I started thinking to myself, and I said, well, Black entrepreneurship is not new, right? We've been doing this. And there's data. So I said, well, what if we go back 100 or so years and really try to understand what the trajectory of Black entrepreneurship is? And that led us to these stories of successful high growth Black businesses that have existed since the 1800s. And the Green Project is about those stories and those entrepreneurs who have been innovating forever. And so we're pulling a lot of data from that project, but there's a beautiful story that's going to be told from the Green Project as well. And we named it after Victor Hugo's Green Book, if you're familiar with that.
Absolutely, very familiar with the book, and is a helpful hint to so many people back in the day. And I think that more people need to get the Green Book
They do.
to
They do.
know from whence we've come, for sure, for sure.
Absolutely.
As we look right now, and as I was saying, I was having a conversation with some of our earlier guests talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. Some of the things that we're really talking about is really that we have to embrace some of these policies that are out there, and I mean policies not in what they're trying to enact. I'm talking about policies that we're trying to enact to get people more on board to know that there's some things that are out there that can really be beneficial to helping the cause. I know you're at the front lines of that as well when it comes to policy reform. What are some of the things that the public should be paying attention to in the scope of your work with regards to policy reform that maybe we're not?
Sure. I would say the first thing from a policy perspective for us to pay attention to is um, investment policies around investing, becoming investors, investing in startups. We are in, not just moving towards, but we are in uh, uh, a technology and innovation sort of renaissance. And so we are living in an age where everything is being sort of repurposed and every facet of life is being changed by AI and technology. And so there are a lot of startups and companies that are popping up. And so people are investing in these companies. Those who get in now and invest in these companies will hold the wealth of the future. So if we want to have economic standing and prosperity in the future of the economy and not just simply be the workforce of the future, we need to be able to invest in ideas and companies. And right now, the regulations around, who can be an investor, what the ceiling is for that. There's a lot of policy reform that's happening. A lot of great policies being pushed forward, bipartisan policies around allowing everyday average folks to be able to invest and lowering the barrier of entry. Because if we cannot invest, we are not participating, fully in the economy of the future, right? So now is the time, so we need to innovate ourselves, get IP and trademark and patent protection. So looking at policies around intellectual property, particularly the creator economy. I know you have heard about what's happening with, on TikTok and all the creators. And so we need policies around protecting creativity, because creativity in the creator economy is one of the fastest growing economic pathways for our community and investing. So those are the two policy areas that I would keep my eye on.
And as you look at barriers out there, I mean, obviously there's a lot of barriers that we are contending with on a daily basis. What would be the biggest barrier that I think entrepreneurs are really contending with these days? I mean, I would say, just boots on the ground, access to resources, right? And then also access to funding capital. And then when you do have grants that are actually out there that are available, some of these entrepreneurs really don't qualify because they don't necessarily have the right kind of, whether it's the financial backing, whether it's, the stuff that's required for a grant application, the vault applications. There's some challenges out there.
Yeah, for sure. There are a lot of challenges. And I want to be super, intentional in answering this. I believe there's more opportunity than challenges, and I would just encourage our community to stay focused on a asset-based mindset and abundance. We have enough, right? There is, when you look at what's driving the economy, culture being one of those things, technology, innovation, I would look at this opportunity. There's a demographic shift happening right now. By 2045 here in the U.S., it will be majority people of color. I realize the Black community is not the majority in that majority, but given the fact that we have this AI revolution that's happening, these industries being repurposed, I would focus on the opportunity. I think there's much more opportunity than challenges right now. We have some amazing folks breaking down those barriers to those challenges, and we need to continue to do so. But I would tell us to double down on the opportunity. We need more production, not focusing so much on our spending power. And this is where the Black GDP that we are launching the end of this year in September, we have a Black GDP report coming out, and it's focused on what are the opportunities to accelerate and expand the Black GDP to increase production across sectors and industries that are high growth and are going to generate economic activity. And so we need to be getting into those spaces. The barriers in those spaces, again, are around capital and policy. And so I think every entrepreneur, every innovator, every creative has to be in advocacy work at this point in time. There's not a choice, right? There's not the people that do advocacy work and then entrepreneurs, and innovators. I think everybody needs to be on the front lines, but we have to be building and taking advantage of these windows of opportunity because they're closing fast. We are already behind. Like I said, AI is the topic of the conversation right now, but folks are quickly moving on to quantum, and we need to be building businesses and innovating in those spaces.
Lakeisha, how do people get in touch with you for the work that you're doing? Obviously, there may be an entrepreneur out there, innovator out there that needs to get that much needed advice.
Sure. You can reach me. I think that's at LakeishaFrench.com. Shoot me a message. I'm on Instagram as well and LinkedIn. Very active on LinkedIn, and you can go to futureincolor.org and follow us, and make sure you keep an eye out for the Black GDP report coming out at the end of this year. Every entrepreneur should have it in their hand.
Lakeisha French, thank you so much for joining us, and we're glad to have you, and certainly we'll continue to follow the work.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to it.
All right, and keep up the great work. Lakeisha French here with us. And listen, taking a quick break, but guess what? We got more right after this. And we are back. In light of the intersection of systemic and societal challenges concerning educational policies, it's crucial to recognize the regrettable truth that numerous students fall prey to the flaws within the American criminal justice system. Now, regrettably, individuals from marginalized groups, particularly students of color and those with disabilities, are disproportionately impacted by these issues. We've got joining with us now award-winning film director and producer of Preschool to Prison, Baptiste, also known as Dr. K. Dr. K, good to have you.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you having this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's a joy to have you, and a joy to really talk about some of the work that you're doing. And so when we talk about the film, obviously a long time coming, and you're out there now. Talk to us about this film.
Well, so the film is a short documentary that really tells the story about what the education system is like in the United States and what the disproportionalities are for children of color and children with special needs, irrespective of race.
Right.
And what we find is that in this country is that the school to prison pipeline is not a new phenomenon. And what I did was really focus on, hold on, it's not just the school to prison pipeline, but it's the preschool to prison pipeline. And the reason we focused on preschool was because we found that the school to prison pipeline just became another phrase where people say, yeah, that happens, and maybe those kids need to be there, and they don't really, you have some people advocating, you do have groups out there that are fighting against the school to prison pipeline, but we need more voices and more activism around it. Also, what I've found is that when you say the school to prison pipeline, you have an image in your head, right? And that image is usually of a child that is tall, right, that is older. And so when we start thinking about our youth, we often might think like, well, what did they do wrong? Maybe they need to be going to jail, right? That's what we think. But when you say preschool to prison, you get another image in your mind.
Exactly.
You don't see that tall child in your head. You don't see that. What you see is a little child. You automatically start thinking preschool, 4 years old, right? Which is about the age, and some kids come in at 2.9. So that's where we really wanted to focus on the zero tolerance policies that are used in schools to justify suspensions and expulsions for minor infractions. I'm not talking about crime.
Right, you're talking about minor stuff.
We are not talking about crime. We don't even address crime in the documentary. We are solely focused on non-criminal behaviors, right? With things where kids have been kicked out of school because of their hair. There was a story about 2 months ago with the young man in Texas who was kicked out of school because he has locks. I have locks. Right? And so can you imagine, I'm kicked out of school in 2023 when that happened. We're still kicking kids out of school for their hair. We've had kids restrained, dragged, and arrested in this country for crying too much on a carpet, not doing homework. Young lady was arrested during COVID for not doing homework. Another young lady was arrested for typing too much in the chat on Zoom. You know, these are the kind of things that we're addressing, not crime.
So looking at that, right, and you're coming into this, and here you are directing this film and finding these things out. Anything really take you by surprise in the midst of filming?
You know, I try to continuously remain surprised. And the reason I say that is because if I'm no longer surprised, that means I start to become desensitized. And I don't want to become desensitized. I want to remain centered in these stories. I want to continue to humanize the people who trust us enough to share their stories with us. And most of it is not surprising. What comes up more for me is disgust, right? Anger, but not surprise. I was a special education teacher.
Right.
You know, having worked in the system for almost 2 decades now, I've seen a lot. I've worked with educators across 32 states now. I've seen this in mass. It's not just here, right? It's everywhere.
And when you talk about seeing it everywhere, obviously, I want to say it's disheartening, right? To see it.
Yeah.
You think that you're living isolated sometimes. You want it to be isolated. You want it to be, hey, this is just over here. But as you travel around, now you're seeing it more and more.
Right.
What is the takeaways that you're getting from audiences who are recognizing now that this is more than just an isolated occurrence? I was thinking back to George Floyd, the time when George Floyd's murder was taking place. Will Smith was saying, no, this didn't change, it's just now on film.
Exactly.
It's just
That's
now on
exactly.
film.
And the reaction we've been getting has been overwhelmingly positive. And I'm really grateful for that because, you know, one of the things that we talked about when we decided to do the doc was I was very clear with the crew of that we must ensure that we humanize the people who are sharing their stories. We want to remain sensitive to the people who are sharing their stories. We want to ensure that we tell their stories in an accurate way that depicts exactly what they want everyone to know, because these are experiences that you would never want to go through, right? I had a family member that was incarcerated, and I know exactly what that feels like as a family member. It's one thing when I was a teacher and I had students who were incarcerated. It stings, but it feels so different when it's your loved one.
Yeah.
Right? And so when that happened, you know, my family, we're still recovering from that. You know, my brother will never be the same after that. And so if I can bring awareness to this, which is what one of my goals, right, are to bring that awareness, but also the action. It can't just be awareness, but now that we're aware, what is the action? What are we going to do about it? Because we have too many children, right, that are going through. And in fact, a report showed that in 2021, only 7% of student arrests was for violent crimes. Only 7%. But we focus on that. Right? And people try to...
That becomes sensationalized.
Exactly.
Right.
And people want to muddy this movement around dismantling the preschool to prison pipeline for that 7%, when this is not even talking about violent crimes, right? We're strictly talking about nonsensical things that have been identified in schools as being a reason to remove students and suspend them or expel them, which is just completely ridiculous.
So for viewers out there that has the opportunity to see the documentary, how do they go about doing that?
So right now we're actually still in our film festival circuit run. We have been in film festivals for less than a year. So for a year we've been doing our run. We actually have 3 screenings this month, so people can follow us online. Definitely go to Preschool to Prison Doc on Instagram. We actually post there where we're screening. We do have a screening coming up on Sunday in Vero Beach, Florida.
Okay.
We also have another screening coming up this month in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is 30 minutes outside of Philly. And we've gotten a lot of requests over there. And then we do have another one coming up at the end of this month, the last weekend in this month, and that's going to be in Dubuque, Iowa. So yeah, so we're really excited about where the film is going and how it's transcending across demographics and race, because this really is a serious issue. And if we don't take care of our children, who are our most precious asset, just think about what will life look like for us 5, 10, 15 years from now.
Yeah, getting behind that lens
Yes.
and being out there to shoot obviously is to bring home the story.
Yes.
But it's also advocacy attached to it.
Absolutely.
So let's unpack this for a minute, because the advocacy that comes with the work that you do.
Yes, yes. A lot of the advocacy, you know, I've always been an advocate. Every time I've stepped into a school, every time I've sat with a school leader, every time I've just sat with an educator, period, every time I've sat with a lawmaker, it was always about speaking up for those who don't even know how to share what the issue is, who don't know how to ask for what they need, who don't know how to communicate, who don't have the access or the wherewithal, right? Because a lot of this also is the wherewithal to even know, where do I even go to even ask for this level of support? And many educators will tell you, I have no desire to be a part of politics. I have no desire to learn policy. I want to teach, right? Like, you think about the joy and the excitement of teaching, like, you come in because you want to make a difference, right?
Right.
And that's what educators will
Exactly.
always tell you, I want to make a difference. They're not coming in to change policy, but you then think, thank goodness there are people like me and other organizations who really are about that and out in the front lines and saying, we are willing to do that for you, and we really do need to do something different. Our Black children only make up 15% of the student population in this country,
Right.
but account for 41% of students who have been arrested, right? And so there's so many layers to this.
But the argument is going to be, those kids are bad. And your work has found
It's not that the kids are bad. Kids need guidance. Kids need structure. We're not talking about crime. We are talking about children doing things that are developmentally appropriate, where they have still been targeted, right, for these behaviors. What we also find is there's a large number of students with disabilities that are also part of this, right? I mean, when you start thinking about a person with a disability, most people get a visual image in your mind, right? And not all disabilities mean you have to have a physical impairment.
Right.
And so if we don't have an understanding, which we do need to increase training, and I do advocate for, we need improved training for educators around understanding disabilities and what the different disabilities look like. How does it manifest itself, right? Especially now you start talking about a child. So the human brain doesn't fully develop until 25. So you already have a child already dealing with, right, the growth, the adolescence. So now you add a disability to that. Right? So a lot of times teachers and educators in general, right, whether it's a teacher, a coach, a counselor, or a principal, are simply untrained and unaware of how those disabilities manifest itself, and so they don't know how to handle those behaviors. And so now calling school resource officers or school safety officers become the default, because I have an obligation to teach all the children here. I have a child who's not in compliance to what I think they should be in compliance to, right? And so now I need to hit that default button and call in the SRO or calling the school safety agent to come and remove that child, because I have to teach and I don't have time for this.
Right, and that's the scary part, to watch
Exactly.
how students' lives are impacted, whether it's academic records, disciplinary records that carry them and stay with them
Yes.
for, some stay with them for a minute,
Yes.
others, of course, will fall off.
Right.
But the fact of just incurring that
Yes.
and not being able to really deal with the issue at hand, which really is sometimes such as a behavioral issue, but that's tied to mental health,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
and we're not connecting the dots. We're just using broad strokes.
I agree. And this is why we have to prioritize social emotional learning. We have to prioritize mental health in schools. We have children coming in with a lot of trauma. And let's be clear, we also have kids that don't come in with trauma, and the trauma gets developed at school, right? And so every adult is responsible. It's not solely placed on educators. It's not solely placed on parents. It should not be. Both have to come together and work together. We really have to take a whole child approach. We cannot ignore the traumas, because that also is going to manifest itself in the child's behavior. Right? So we have to start thinking about, what does retraining look like for educators? So part of my work is working with universities to revamp teacher prep programs, to revamp leadership prep programs, right? To ensure that we provide training and resources for parents. When you start looking at, let's start paring down what that looks like, right? So broadly, we had the Keeping All Students Safe Act that was presented to the House in 2023. And what that act talked about was that it wanted to eliminate seclusion and restraint for kids. And that districts that had a very high number of kids that were restrained, that used severe punishment, have to have some type of report or something in place to show, what are you doing in lieu of restraining children, right? And when we're talking about restraint and seclusion, most times it's against a child with a disability.
Right.
A lot of children with autism, right? So there's some sensory challenges there.
They have to be able to bridge those gaps.
Exactly. And so I'll give you a perfect example. A child, 5-year-old child, on the first day of school was suspended because the child had autism. Child ran into the bathroom, was scared, locked the bathroom. Another child was in the bathroom. They accused the child of going in and having, with the intent to have some inappropriate contact with another child. Right? That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. We're not talking about kids bringing in weapons. We're not talking about kids that assault.
Right. And I think there has to be a clear demarcation and delineation between what we're talking about
Exactly.
here. And it's not that we're talking about the most violent ones. We're
No.
not talking about violent. We're talking about incidents that happen
Yes.
that are low-level offenses
Yes.
that get the full brunt
Exactly.
of consequences.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And when you speak to police officers, right, and this is where we talk about even training on that, how do we bring in SROs and police departments with school departments to talk about what training. No officer will ever tell you that they went into law enforcement to arrest children for crying on a carpet.
Right.
Right? Children
Right.
running away. That's not what they came into this for now.
They didn't come into it for, and unfortunately, they've been put into
A precarious situation.
And I think
Yeah.
it does even worse in terms of the separation between community and police.
I
again,
completely agree.
on the fact of, now I see them in school. It's bad enough
Right.
I see you out on the street.
Yes.
And I've got my own. Now I've got these school experiences
Exactly.
that are somewhat more closer to home and more personal. So
Yeah.
a lot of work that has to be done. Before we go, please,
Yes.
how people get in touch with you, what do they do?
Oh, they need to go to our Instagram. We are all over social media. If they go to our Instagram, preschool to prison doc, DOC, and you'll see that's where we start listing. We put out videos. Also, if you go to preschool to prison documentary.com, that is all one word spelled out, and it's TL, not the number 2, but preschool to prison documentary.com. And there they will be able to see our videos, and they'll be able to find all of our social media handles.
Dr. K, thank you so much for
Daren,
being with us.
thank you.
All right, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Alrighty. Listen, we are taking a quick break, but guess what? We got more coming up. We'll be right back.
BronxNet is a wonderful place because it inspires people that want to consider a career in film and television. It's a way to come, learn, it's cost effective, and it's a way to actualize your dreams.
Hello, my name is Tyrone Lowe. I host a show at BronxNet called The Legends, where I bring real legends, DJs, upcoming artists, actually people from the past that's into entertainment. I want to thank BronxNet. First of all, I want to thank for the 30 years of the actually being active here. It has opened a lot of doors for me to the point where I'm branching off to have my own network. Fulfill your dreams here. That's all I have to say.
Congratulations, BronxNet, on 30 years. You started when I was born. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. This is Verona, the dancing reporter for Create Your World, and I thank BronxNet for being here to help me produce my show.
Dedicated to infusing every moment with the magic of blossoms, Do Flowers is more than just a floral business, a testament to resilience, creativity, and the pursuit of dreams. Our next guest, a visionary whose journey embodies the essence of perseverance and passion. Join us now. We got the founder of Do Flowers, Erica Du.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, brother.
Nice to meet you.
How's everything?
Everything's well.
How did you get to the place of saying I'm a founder? I'm doing flowers.
Where did I get the idea from? Well, honestly, it came from God. That's for one. And it came from the nature of just loving flowers and knowing what flowers symbolize. And I wanted to just do something that's different. So, but to answer your question, it came from God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the journey and how you got to where you are today.
The journey. The journey comes from Ghana. That's where I was born. And I came here at a young age, about 6 years old. I moved to the Bronx. You know, the Bronx is ups and downs, so you go through your struggles.
Absolutely.
Trying to fit in. So through that stage, I, made my mistakes. And then I made mistakes, and some was very intentional, and it was good. But through the trials of living in the Bronx and ended up where I was at, I could talk about it later. And coming home, I realized I have to start something. I have to do something that is going to make an impact on my life. So that's where that came about.
Yeah. And so to where you are today, talk about where you are today.
Where am I today? Today I'm 34 years old. I'm single, I'm sharp, I'm wiser. My vision's clearer now, and I'm more focused than ever. Not saying there's no room for growth, but I'm getting there.
You on it.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Standing on business.
I'm standing on it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So for yourself, obviously looking at your business right now and seeing the way things are going, how would you characterize, for somebody on the outside, if I had to sit at the table saying, tell me a little bit about your business, how would you characterize it?
I would say my business is more creativity. It's not the norm as far as like, I'm gonna make arrangements or sell flowers. I'm trying to tap into everything, but not everything. I'm trying to create different lanes. I used to do entertainment when it comes to the party side. So I'm trying to fuse that also with the flowers and the events. I'm trying to create moments that will last forever. And I just want to be unique in my own way.
Yeah.
I can't really pinpoint it, but it's coming.
Yeah. And yourself, there's more to just the business. It's also about you're also sending the message too, right? Because through your life experiences, through the things you've been through, obviously you're sending a message to others that this is achievable.
Yeah, because I don't think the idea is there, but besides the idea, you gotta have the characteristic and the factors that makes you a person to attack this. And that's what is in me. And that's where the struggle and everything come from. You feel me? So I think with that and adding the idea of the business, it could connect.
Yeah. Do you feel as though that the work that you do inspires others?
Yes, for sure. I believe it's the work, but I also believe it's the fact that I'm trying and I'm doing it. And that's where the inspiration comes from, that other people might say, but you know what? I know where he came from, I know what he's doing, and if he's just trying to do it, let me try too.
Right.
You feel me?
Yeah. And so I know that you've had, a past that takes you to your present.
Yeah.
Incarceration was a part of that, right?
Correct.
And so for yourself, how instrumental was incarceration in your journey to where you are today?
I feel like incarceration is a major part of my journey. For one, it taught me better discipline. It taught me patience. And it made me just overall be a people's person. Because being where I was at is a whole different type of man. It's different. You got good guys who just made mistakes. Then you also got the bad guys who was really bad.
Right.
You feel me? So, and it comes to all race, white, black, Jewish, Chinese, all walks of life that was in there. So learning to adapt through them and coming home and realize if I could adapt through there, I could easily adapt through here. Because in there, you can't walk out. There's no run away. Home, when you outside in the free world, if something goes wrong, you go run away.
Right.
You can shoot a text message. You know how internet do. So knowing that, I could easily get involved with something, and if I know it's bad, I could easily leave and then come back and fix it. Yeah.
So for people who want to find out where you're located, how do they go about that?
Right now I'm online. I do flowers.com. I deliver anywhere in New York City, parts of New Jersey, and just find me online. Just Instagram, I do flowers LLC. Mostly just online and phone call.
Yeah.
That's where people can find me.
And so for yourself, when you think about the flower business right now, you see what you're doing, you've had some tremendous success. You got some years ahead, so what's the plan ahead?
I mean, the plan, honestly, even though it's years ahead, but it's no lesson, it's no book for this game. So as I'm learning the game day by day, I'm realizing in the next 5 years, I want to organize and create a system that I do flowers can sustain without me and with me. I want to master that first, and also use I do flowers to branch out, to help different people, to help Africa, to help people in America, to show other individuals they could maybe become a part of I do flowers in a way. So that's where I see myself aiming for, and the rest God will tell me.
Yeah. You're a Bronx native, but you have some Ghana roots.
Yeah. I was raised in the Bronx.
Yeah.
It's Tracy Towers, to be exact. But yeah, I was born in Ghana, and being in Ghana for about 6-7 years before coming here, the values still in me. I was raised by both my parents. They're still alive, thank God. And I'm just, it's different.
Yeah. Before we go, I gotta get your take, because so many people have different, visions about what Ghana's like. From your perspective, you're there. Give us a
From my
Ghanaian
perspective, Ghana is very, very beautiful. Ghana is whatever you make it. I feel like, of course, people know that Ghana is open land and it's developing. So knowing that it's developing, there's a chance now for young Americans, young Black Americans, even the kids in Africa, to start something that will make an impact. Since it's developing, you can develop it and it will sustain now. Yeah.
I've always told people, there's two sides of Africa that you see. You see the one that's, sometimes the media likes to project, and then there's another side that, that the people don't always get to see.
Yeah, and I want people to come and see.
Right.
Come and see for yourself. And the best time for you to go in Ghana is right before Christmas. And so you can gain the whole momentum, how live it is. And then after that, you go on the calm side. But Ghana's where
But there's no white Christmas out there in Ghana, though.
No white Christmas.
No white Christmas.
It's God. It's God out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good having you, man.
Thank you.
Definitely, man. And we want to support and make sure that people know more about your business. So, Eric Adu, who is also the founder of Adu Flowers, want to make sure that you get connected to him. Thank you so much for being with us, Eric.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story, bro.
I appreciate you.
All right, appreciate you. Listen, we come to the end of our show today. Hope that you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx social justice and anti-violence forums. Now, if you want to join the conversation, present your point of view, visit our website, BronxNet TV. Then also, we encourage you, join us next week. We'll elevate the discussion and bring further awareness across the globe. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, saying take care. God bless.